In response to popular demand that we read more South Bend Tribune editorials on the air, wish fulfilled. Yesterday, Sunday, there was an editorial. This is written by the editorial board, published by the paper. This is the official position of the South Bend Tribune. That's connected to some of the reporting that we've been doing recently. It's called, and there's a picture of a police car, because this is about police cars, apparently. Not that there are actual human individuals related to this story. It's about a police car. It's titled, Our Opinion, Remember to Back Full Transparency on South Bend Police Tapes. And it begins with a quotation. There is support for full transparency on the operations of city government. We were concerned with the decisions and the processes behind the firing of Karen DePape and demotion of Police Chief Darrell Boykins. Karen DePape was the communications director who was fired after listening to some of these police recordings and transferring them to tape. The editorial continues. That's the end of the quote. That comment from South Bend Common Council President Tim Scott, still a president, came 2 years ago in response to a federal appeals court ruling on the wiretap case that has roiled this city for more than 7 years. Scott also noted at the time that the council represents citizens who have demanded to know more about the issue. True. He was right. See, South Bend Tribune and we do agree on some things. The tapes, secret recordings of South Bend police officers allegedly using racial slurs and discussing breaking the law should be released. Now, the tapes also appear to discuss other things, but the Tribune hasn't reported that yet. The Tribune continues, quote, the issues won't go away and the community won't move on until the facts are revealed, we wrote in a 2014 comment. That's the Tribune quoting the Tribune. We haven't changed our view on the importance of the public's right to know. The council also shouldn't change its stance on full transparency. Last week, the Tribune reported that the council is considering dropping its fight to force release of the police tapes. The council is suing to get these tapes released if it can confirm what an ex-police employee heard on the tapes. That's DePape, Karen DePape. In a court filing, council attorney Robert Palmer referenced how recent media reports about the contents of the tapes could have a, quote, significant impact on the Common Council's litigation strategy based on any assumption that the alleged statements are accurate, unquote. The Young Turks, a politically progressive website, also true, recently published what it says are excerpts from a written account of what the former employee, Karen DePape, heard on the tapes. DePape, the ex-communications director for the police department, makes it sound like she's been excommunicated. The former communications director for the police department first approached Boykins, that's the chief, regarding her concerns about the secret recordings of officers and has indicated she heard them making racial slurs and discussing illegal activities. Has indicated means she told the Tribune right back when this happened in 2012. Council member John Vorty, I hope I'm saying his name correctly, said Wednesday that he and his colleagues have discussed in executive session, that means secretly, behind closed doors, which they're allowed to do, right? That's where you get advice from your legal counsel. Have discussed in executive session with their attorney, Robert Palmer, who gets a second first reference, which is nice, whether to proceed with their lawsuit in light of the TYT story. In other words, due to our reporting, apparently, some members of the council are now considering dropping the lawsuit. They go on to explain, quoting the editorial again, the decision could rest on whether DePape would confirm to council members what she heard on the recorded tapes. Quote, as it was laid out to us, this is Vorty talking, there wasn't anything to be gained by going ahead. I don't think anyone objected to dropping the lawsuit, if these things could be corroborated. It was suggested or told to us that the best way to do that was probably to find out if DePape would either confirm or deny what's in these things that have been released are true. If she said they are true, what's the point? I'll answer that in a second. But the Tribune will answer it right now. What's the point? Perhaps council members could ask members of this community where speculation about what's on the tapes has run wild and distrust and suspicion fills the vacuum. If DePape were to address the council, would it be in a public setting? Or how would the public be informed about what she said? Partial confirmation of the tape's contents would come off as a convenient shortcut, not the full transparency the council has spent the past several years pursuing. The timing of the decision to drop the case after 7 years of litigation and more than $2 million of tax money spent on legal fees invites further questions. Why now? Well, mostly because of our reporting, it appears. Why the sudden concern about the legal bills? It's not sudden. There's been concern about legal bills for years, but also the Tribune continuing to refer to it as 2 million of legal bills as though that's the council's bill, when in fact Buttigieg also racked up some legal bills before he stepped aside. And I'll get to that in a moment too. It says, hard to tell, since aside from Vorty, council members aren't talking publicly, referring questions to the council attorney, or not returning calls from the Tribune seeking comment. We're almost done. The council's decision on the lawsuit could come in the next few weeks. Council members should keep in mind that the passage of time and the spending of taxpayer dollars haven't lessened the public's right to know what's on those tapes. Correct. I try not to do opinion stuff, but certainly the public has a right to know. That's, as a reporter, that's generally the abiding principle that guides my work, is that people should know things. So I feel like I'm not stepping out of my lane by endorsing that. So let's address some of these things here. Vorty asks, what's the point if the pape verifies, which I hope she would, what we have reported about the documents that the city has had for years containing her description of what's on the tapes. For one thing, we didn't report everything that's in the documents. For another, the documents don't report everything on the tapes. For another, the tapes don't contain everything that was said on the police recordings. So, and the other issue about the tapes is, about what's the point, is that, again, there are aspects of these tapes that go beyond what the Tribune itself is reporting from our own stories, right? The very first quote they have is from the president of the city council, the common council, who says, we were concerned with the decisions and the processes behind the firing and demotion. Well, that's the new stuff that's come out, goes directly to that. If you haven't followed our reporting, we revealed last month, I think it was, that according to these documents that we had access to, Karen DePape wrote in these legal documents that she heard police discussing the use of 2 Buttigieg donors, both of whom denied it to me, 2 Buttigieg donors to get Buttigieg, before he was even elected, to agree to get rid of Boykins, the black chief. So let's get to the executive session they're talking about. Bear with me. If DePape were, right, so the timing of the decision, so it says the council's decision on the lawsuit could come in the next few weeks. Yeah, it could. This just went out today from the Common Council, President Tim Scott, announcing an executive session this Wednesday, 2 days from now. The agenda includes one item, council discussion on wiretapping case, and it says the executive session shall be held with regard to strategy in relation to pending litigation. In other words, for the city council's lawyer to drop the case, the lawyer needs to have the council, and I believe it's a majority, tell them to drop the case. For the council to make a decision, they have to have a public meeting. So they will hear, apparently, from their attorneys in private, which is what you do with your attorney, right? That makes sense. That's okay. That's not a conspiracy. That's happening this Wednesday. But most likely what's going to happen is the opinions of the individual council members about whether to proceed are probably going to get baked in pretty well on Wednesday. It's only at the next council meeting, when they meet in public, that they can actually make the decision of whether or not to drop the case. That meeting, the next open meeting, is Monday in South Bend. And I'm going to be there for it. So it'll be interesting to meet some of these folks face to face for the first time. But I do want to get to the bigger point, which is, why are we still having this fight? Pete Buttigieg is no longer a party to this litigation. He was originally, but now we have a group of cops and ex-cops who are fighting in court against the city council's lawsuit. In other words, if the cops drop their lawsuit, then there's no challenge anymore to the release of the tapes. That all the legal challenges would fall away unless, of course, Pete Buttigieg decided again to say, no, I'm not going to. But the lawsuit is to force him to. And these cops are pursuing a lawsuit to challenge it. And here's where it gets interesting. And I want everyone to understand, this is not a conspiracy theory. Or if it is, it's the emphasis on theory, right? This is not the information. This is not, what you're about to hear is not this secret information. This is information that we already have that raises questions that we still need answers to. So don't anyone walk away thinking, oh, now we know. We don't know. That's the point. Okay, with that said, it struck me that we've got a bunch of cops off the top of my head, and when I say cops, I mean including former cops. It was originally 4 cops and 1 spouse, and now there's something like 2 or 3 other cops who have joined in that lawsuit. So we're talking maybe 7 cops. And the question is, why would they still be spending their retirement time, energy, and money? Because if it's cost the city $2 million, who knows what it's cost the other parties in this case. So, and these are not rich people. Let's not pretend that these are rich people. Although South Bend allows all kinds of employees to have side gigs, so maybe they are rich people. But there are basically 3 possibilities for who's paying for the legal action to block release of the tapes, okay? The cops themselves are paying for it, or someone else is paying for it, or the lawyer is not even asking anyone to pay for it. Maybe no one's paying for it. So cops, someone else, no one. Let's assume that the cops are not dropping their own money on this, at least not in toto, right? There could be some mix of all 3 of these things. Then we're left with, well, actually, let's stay with the cops for a minute. How would the cops afford this, okay? Well, back in 2013, the city of South Bend settled a lawsuit filed by most of these police officers for, I believe, as to whether or not they were wiretapped illegally, paying them $500,000 to settle a lawsuit claiming that they were wiretapped illegally. So maybe they do have the money, in which case the money came from the city. And it was Buttigieg who decided to make this settlement. So if that money is paying for the legal work in this case, then it's actually still money provided by Buttigieg, okay? So that's one possibility. The other is that a third party is paying for it, and we'll kind of get to that later. But the the third is that no one's paying for it. It's pro bono. So why would it be pro bono? Well, the law firm representing the cops, some of its partners have been Buttigieg donors in the past. Not that unusual for a big law firm or an ambitious law firm, politically connected law firm, to give to a successful politician. That's not that unusual. But the lead attorney on this case is a guy named Dan Pfeiffer, who I have, I believe, spoken to, or at least texted and emailed. I don't remember if we've ever spoken on the phone. And Dan Pfeiffer has another connection to one of the cops in this case. One of the cops in this case is a guy named Tim Corbett, who was head of the Metro Homicide Unit, and is also depicted in these documents, described as essentially the point person for getting the donors to make Buttigieg agree to get rid of the chief. Tim Corbett, the guy I just described, ran for sheriff last year, county sheriff. A big part of his campaign was a $45,000, if I have that number correct off the top of my head, $45,000 loan to run for county sheriff. The loan had 3 backers. We're going to talk about them one by one. Bear with me. Actually, you know what? If you've come this far, there's nothing I can do to make you go away, because I'm so deep in the weeds at this point. If you see, the moment you start out with a South Bend Tribune editorial reading, you've just failed Clickbait Academy. So let's talk about these 3 people who backed Corbett's loan last year. One was his lawyer, Dan Pfeiffer. Okay, so Dan Pfeiffer has already shown a willingness to put his checkbook on the line to help Tim Corbett. The second of these three campaign backers was a guy named Bob Urbanski. Bob Urbanski was one of the two donors who Corbett allegedly, although Urbanski denied it to me, allegedly tried to get Buttigieg to get rid of Boykins. The third backer of Corbett's loan was a guy named Rich Hill. Rich Hill was the outside counsel that Buttigieg brought in 2012, who dealt with the tapes case and was the lead attorney, in essence, when it came to the decision to respond to the federal investigation by getting rid of Darryl Boykins. So those are the three people who stood up for Tim Corbett in his campaign last year. So here's where it gets even more interesting. Allegedly or ostensibly, the reason the cops would still want to block these tapes from being released is that their good names might be besmirched in some way by what's on the tapes. I don't know this for a fact, but given the documents I've seen, given the rumors and informed speculation that I've heard, it's hard to believe that there's that much worse that's on the tapes that didn't make it into the documents that I saw. But what had never been out there before was the stuff about Buttigieg and his donors. That stuff had never made it out before. And that's kind of the last piece here that it even makes sense for anyone to still want to protect. Some of the cops, there's a cop named Jim Taylor, who was one of the ones who joined later. I'm not aware of Taylor having any role on the tapes or in the recordings that the tapes were transferred from in any of this, other than having discussed with Buttigieg the Boykins stuff. So none of what I just said is proof of anything. Let's be very clear about that. But it does raise, I think, enough questions that it does not make sense to assume that everything that needs to be known about what Tim Scott, the council president, said was the council's purpose in pursuing this. We were concerned with the decisions and the processes behind the firing and demotion. If that was true then, there's no reason that should still not be true, and more reason you should be concerned given what we reported. So 2 days from now, they're going to talk about it in executive session apparently, and then 1 week from today, South Bend, County City Building, it appears they're going to be talking about it in open session. I'm going to be there. And if you're in the area, come on by and say hello. And with that annoyingly smug little unexpected ending, I apologize for the smugness. But I did genuinely mean come on by and say hello. But so let's see what you folks have to say in the DLJ says, I'm getting a little lost with all the names. I need a diagram. You know who else needs a diagram, DLJ? This guy. This guy needs a diagram as well. And I considered trying to get one made for the big piece we did, but it was a resource question, I'm afraid. Mr. Elder says, no matter what, there will always be people who love the Republicans because they are, and then says bad things about Republicans. Robert James has a nickname for Buttigieg and says he should drop out. I don't see why he should or ought to. Sherry Addis says, I have to go make breakfast. Bye, Sherry. Solve the world's problems while I'm gone. Okay, so apparently we're going extra long today. The Juice says, LOL, I'm sorry, man, his name is hilarious. But we're trying to be better than that, right? In general, just as human beings, we're trying to put making fun of people's names because it's funny in the dustbin of history, right? I get it, and I don't even fault you for doing it. It's just that the line between harmless, potentially harmless one-to-one goofing around like that, and it being broadcast and validated is so much thinner now, right? Let's say you say it in a chat room where only a handful of people are watching. Oh, a handful. It's 130 of you are watching right now. Okay, I apologize, massive handful. But that's my point, in a way, is that now 130 people see it. And then I say it, which means hundreds of people see it afterwards. And then who knows, maybe it goes viral because Pete Buttigieg responds to me finally after 10 months. And then thousands of people see it. So we gotta police ourselves a little better and sort of assume anyone can see it at this point. So let's not make fun of people's names. I believe it's of Maltese origin. So, let's be respectful. Margaret Balambo, I apologize if I'm not saying your name correctly after all of my self-righteous BS there about Buttigieg's name, so I apologize if I didn't get your name right, Margaret. Says, when the world is at its darkest, I welcome comedy. Yes, me too, I promise you. I've worked in comedy, I've aspired in comedy, I don't do it well, but I enjoy playing in the sandbox. But let's punch up in our comedy rather than punch other. Mr. Elder says, far-right wingers will always have some kind of base. That can't be helped, but I believe the majority on this speck of dust are on the left. I think the majority, or at least a plurality, aren't anywhere, right? They don't necessarily parse all these things in ideological terms. A lot of them are responding to, do I like this person? And that's for some of them, that's it. Heavy Gusto says, oh, and Margaret and Heavy Gusto, I should say hello to both of you, because I don't think I've seen your names here before, and we're getting a lot of new people lately, so I'm thankful to all of you folks who've been around for a while and are helping to spread the word. I don't know what you're doing, but man, it's great. So those of you who aren't part of it, find out what the others are doing and do more of that, because we're just doing great lately, and I really appreciate it. And welcome to the newcomers. Heavy Gusto says, when you're from the north of England in the midst of Brexit, watching a vid on corruption of a low-tier presidential candidate, and then smiley face with closed eyes. And I will say, I'm not sure Buttigieg is a low-tier presidential candidate. I would certainly say the polls put him in the top 5, and in the early voting states, in the primaries, caucuses, Buttigieg is doing even better than that. So I think any writing off of Pete Buttigieg at this point is very premature. By the way, top 3 fundraiser, I believe, better than Biden in the last quarter. Low tier is definitely pushing it for a way to describe Buttigieg. Reller82 says something that I just lost. Here we go. It says, I don't want to be better. I want the world to be better. Well, you can't have the latter if you don't have the former. Wait, no, that's not quite true. But it's not like they're in mutual conflict. So let's all try, and then maybe we succeed at the latter. Maybe the world gets better. Kalita says, because they are, and then says bad things about Republicans. Laugh, laugh, smiling, laugh, crying. So, John, I don't know what I did, but you're right, I'm probably guilty of it. Margaret says, I think he just tried to tell us how huge his hands are. Are we talking about Trump now or me? Robert James says, we're among friends, right? Well, yes and no. We are, but who knows who's going to watch it, right? I mean, I hope I can think of everyone who's taken the time and shown the interest to come into this space and hear my, humble thoughts. I consider them a friend regardless of where they are politically, but it's more and more important, like I was saying earlier, to police ourselves even internally, because that membrane is so permeable now between what we say and what we communicate and who hears it. James Harris says, hey, Jonathan, can you put out a shout out? Can you put a shout out to the giant handful who might be Canadian and remind them to vote today? So big shout out to our Canadian folk. And I've worked with any number of Canadians, Kevin Newman, Thalia Shuris. And as for reminding them to vote, I have this awful contrarian feeling about telling people to vote, which is kind of like I grew up in a time where, MTV was all about rock the vote. Everyone was about get out the vote. And just the act of voting itself was seen as like, you were cool now, right? I don't know why doing this indicates cool in any way coming from this whole situation. But the point was like, if you vote, that's it, man. You're the best. Nailed it. And I don't agree with that. I think you should do a little more than vote. And do the research, do the work, do the internal work of thinking, how am I making my decisions? Is it based on whether I want to have a beer with the guy? Or is it based on what she is likely to do for the planet and the country and my family? So if you haven't done all that stuff, I don't necessarily feel that bad about you not voting. I know that's heresy, but so what I would say is, I will remind everyone to vote responsibly, right? Voting is a privilege, just like drinking and then hopefully not at the same time driving, that you get when you grow up. But they're all supposed to be done responsibly. Voting more than anything, I would say, please, please vote responsibly. Kalita says it's okay to have a little fun. That is correct. Fact check. Imperator 1 says, yes, but this goes public after, so fair points made, right? It not only goes public after, it's public right now. And we don't know how public, right? I do this live and I have no idea how many people are going to show up. We're down 4 since I had said 130, so hopefully it's not, going to get seen by too many people, but you never know. Scuba Steve says the real crime, more interestinger. Yes, exactly. My on-the-fly grammatical improvisations are definitely a bad thing. Joseph Murphy says, also the internet never forgets. Some sites actually are disappearing, but to your point, anything you would like to disappear, that's guaranteed to stay around forever. No Middle Ground says, message retracted. I salute your discretion, assuming you applied good second judgment there. Margaret says, I lurk. We love the lurkers. Thank you, lurkers. Reptile Z says, so what I'm getting is that Mayor Pete isn't progressive. Rather, he is subject to the influence of his political funders. Sounds mainstream to me. So let me say a couple things to that. With all apologies to Bill Clinton, it depends what the meaning of is. I'm what you might call an anti-essentialist. So I don't think it's necessarily helpful to think of someone as is anything. If you think that Buttigieg is backing progressive policies, then and you like him for that reason, that's great, that's fine. But what someone is sort of a very hard thing to litigate. How do we know what they actually are or why they actually do things, right? Back in the Clinton, Sanders and then Clinton-Trump campaigns, my whole response to Hillary, people who didn't like Hillary Clinton as a candidate, was if you think she can be bought, then buy her. And what I meant by that was not literally pay her a bribe, but politicians are supposed to respond to what people want, right? We treat that like a bad thing. Well, they're not true to their ideals. They're not supposed to be true to their ideals. They're supposed to represent us. Now, ideally, what we're talking about is something of a merger of those things, right? So they can act with their own personal integrity, which I realize is an essentialist notion in the first place. But the idea should be that they are malleable based on what people want. They understand that people want something generally. They want better lives. They want better cost of living and standards of living for their family, their people, their loved ones, their friends. They want all of those things in general. But what they value in those things, whether it's healthcare or financial security or education or whatever, it's okay, it's appropriate for those values to shift the focus, if not the actual principles of a politician, right? If someone only did what they wanted, they would just say, hey, I've got no need to do interviews or town halls or anything like that. I'm just going to do what I want. You love me now, right? Because of that? Because it doesn't matter to me what you have to say. I know what I am, and I'm going to do that. I don't think that would be a very popular politician, and I don't think it should be. Robert James says, so is it okay to just call him an outright racist for his part in this situation? Again, what I would say is I like very much what a commentator named Jay Smooth, he did a video on this years ago, which I love, which says, when you call, I'm totally paraphrasing and I'm sure I'm ascribing to Jay my own thinking on this, but it was informed by what he had to say. He said, when you ascribe, when you call someone a racist, you're essentially saying their whole being is a certain thing, and we can't really know what someone is in their heart, which is actually up here, but it's also not actually a set fixed thing. It's pieces of computational machinery that are working to create something resembling a human being as a result. And also, I'm young enough that I remember when the standard position on the left, whether you're talking about liberals or the left or Democratic Party, the standard position was that we're all racist. And it doesn't mean we all feel hate, but that we had it in us, right? We're on the scale of I don't remember what the implicit racism, intrinsic, inherent, whatever the phrase is, it's there, right? And when you say he's racist, my concern is the suggestion is I'm not, which then means we don't have to do the work of policing ourselves to identify when, where, how it might manifest, right? We're never going to make ourselves perfect, but we can at least do a better job of minimizing the bad that we inflict upon the world as a result of that imperfection. So I don't think you ought to be calling very many people racist at all, but absolutely flag and call out the actions, the rhetoric, the impact of that might be racist, that might genuinely be racist. And there are concerns. I've talked to Black Lives Matter from South Bend. I've talked to other Black activists in South Bend. And there are concerns about a pattern of not being heard, a pattern of not feeling represented, a pattern of not feeling like they were brought into the circle of who gets talked to in the room where it happens, to steal Lin-Manuel Miranda's phrase. Okay, Joshua J. Should know better than to post that. So Joshua, come on, we're not going to reward, sort of like just dumb anti-homophobic stuff. So let's play nice. Pretend your parents are watching, okay? J Smooth Operator S. Okay, let's see. I have totally lost you guys, and I don't know what you're talking about anymore. Jin Denton, I think, is new. Says, I think the glut, hello, Jin, that's Gin as in gin and tonic, says, I think the glut of lawyers in America, especially in our government, has destroyed our democratic republic. It's a nasty divorce custody battle. Politics always looking for dirt on your opponents. Yeah, but you're supposed to, right? We're supposed to be fighting, right? That's okay. That's the system. America was created to enable, to foster, to cultivate fights. We have opposing interests. We have opposing desires. We have opposing goals. We're supposed to fight. So I would say don't hate the player and don't hate the game. Just have the fight. It's okay. It's okay. We're allowed to disagree. Mr. Elder has mean things to say about Buttigieg. Leonardo da Vinci says, is it true that Bernie Sanders is now number 2 in the polls nationally? I think he's been roughly 2 or 3 pretty much the whole time. But I don't follow them on a regular basis. Margaret says, please don't change the thumbnail for this. It is priceless and makes me smile. Now I'm scared and more likely to change the thumbnail. Let's see. I don't even follow this. Pit bulls are great babysitters. Hello, I'm pretty sure I'd remember that name. Says, is Jon Stewart committing cultural theft by pretending to be Scottish? There's like 4 different references. I have no idea what's going on there. Okay, so Mr. Elder says, like and share, people. That would be great. That helps me, helps us. The more successful TYT ideally is, the more we can justify spending the time and resources on it. And I will, of course, be doing it live from South Bend next week. So If you're in South Bend, catch me on Twitter at JT Larson, JTLARSEN. You can DM me, it would be great to meet you if you're in South Bend. Let's see. The Juice says, I'm a friend. I just see through every candidate except Bernie and Tulsi. The rest are snakes. I'm pretty sure they're human beings, and I don't think we do anyone a service when we dismiss people in dehumanizing terms. You don't have to like them, but let's remember how to fight. Monkey King says, God helps me make my decisions. That's terrifying. Let's see. Mr. Elder says, I myself have Medicare and Medicaid, which is how I know it's good, and I believe everyone should have Medicare for all. Reller82 says, vote with your eyes closed. That's terrifying. Also, you guys are scaring me today, man. Kalita says, nice, vote responsibly. Thank you, Kalita. James Harris says, he's tempted to clip me trying to get the kids to vote in order to be cool. Clip away, folks. I hope you do. It would help me. And really, isn't that the important thing? Hannah Pause says, can you talk about the Fed's daily bailout of the banks in the repo market? I cannot, because I'm not sufficiently informed. But certainly, just as a broad trend, the moral hazard of how banks have socialized risk and privatized reward is it's a bill that we had to pay 10, 11 years ago, and I suspect that we're going to pay it again relatively soon. Carolyn Smith, hello Carolyn, says once there's Medicare for all, the corporations will drop the benefit and everyone will be on it. There's no reason to have our expensive system. That's the thing I don't get about this debate, is always like, we can't afford that system, so we'll take the cheaper one, which is that, plus it also includes CEOs and executives making 7 and 8 figures, and it includes entire armies of actuaries and people whose job is to deny you health care. That's the cheaper option. Shannon Beasley says, get out the informed vote. I like that. What did Jefferson say? Educated populace is our best defense, something like that. Dave C. says, I used to say if people cared about voting as much as sports, we would have a better country. I was wrong, and Trump's election proves people are just as superficial when voting as they are in sports. I've had the same thought. And in fact, as someone in media, when people have said, make sure you don't get in the weeds or whatever, I look at the way sports is reported on, and it's incredible, the stats they keep and the minute detail they apply in the analysis. People love that stuff. People love to have a sense of what exactly happened here. Why exactly did that person do that time in that way? So in that respect, we all hate, I think rightly, when politics is treated as a sport in the sense of, they do a lot of flash and glamour about, who's going to make the pick for this debate, or they say, oh, Biden and Sanders are neck and neck in the polls or whatever. That kind of sports coverage we absolutely should get rid of. And if you're watching that at any point, please do democracy a favor and turn it off. The kind of sports coverage we need of politics is the in-depth analysis, right? And that's a different kind of sports coverage, but it's also a different kind of politics coverage. And the people who are good at the horse race stuff, and you can fill in the blanks on who I'm subtweeting here, are not necessarily the same people who are good at the in-depth stuff. So that's an important distinction to draw, and I hope people will draw that. Reptile Z says, I think that was a straw man reply, but it's not my show. If you meant that I did a straw man, then please let me know, Reptile, and I'll see if I can do better. I hate straw man. And I was trying to think of a meta joke I could make about, anyway, I cannot. Jin Denton says, mean things about Republicans. Mr. Elder says, come on, Mr. Elder, stop making fun of Buttigieg's name, or I'm not going to read out your comments. Reptile Z says, good stuff, JL. Well, thank you. I hope that means I recovered from the straw man that you said I did, or maybe you were talking about someone else. DLJ, hello DLJ, says, if one is anti-essentialist, then one has to recognize that self is an app. I assume you mean an appearance? Yeah, I mean, I think the self is a very unexamined concept. I took a course in college based on Derek Parfit's book, Reasons and Persons, which, let me deflate how presumptuous and stupid that sounds. I don't remember any of it, so please don't think I'm trying to come off as an intellectual here. But it was a fascinating time thinking about what we mean when we refer to a self, right? One of the things it suggests is a continuity, right, of intentionality and desire and memory and all those things. But we don't have those continuities, at least perfectly. So, yeah, what is a self is an unexamined concept when it comes to how it applies to our politics. Shannon Bloom says semantics are a dangerous and slippery slope. The Jew says, I think you mean we're all prejudiced, not racist. I'm not sure. Can you, I hope you'll elaborate on that a little bit. I don't mean we are racist. I mean, the thinking was at the time that we all have maybe prejudice is the word you're looking, or that I should be looking for, in us, right? Whatever seeds give rise to people doing racist things, saying racist things, are there in all of us. And I think it's important to recognize that, you know, when you see kids playing together without being conscious of those things, that's a great thing. But I think it's important to recognize that just because we're not seeing it doesn't mean it's not in there as potential. And as you get older, the situations you get into are more complex than they are playing in a sandbox. They just are. And so those things can come out in different ways. And if you're not policing yourself, they're more likely to come out. And if you assume that you have none of it in you, then when it does come out, you're going to be defensive and say, that's not who I am. Well, no one should be saying that's who you are. You should be responding to what you did or said. Eve says, if South Bend would have voted in a minority mayor, I wonder how this situation would have turned out. You mean because their mayoral election is actually next month, so it hasn't quite happened yet. Although the Democrat, as is typical for South Bend, is expected to win. Mr. Elder says, I'm staying, John is almost done. And with that, I guess that's my cue. Luna Diana says, voting isn't a privilege, it's a right. Yeah, I think I said privilege earlier, and I guess I was making the semi-tongue-in-cheek comparison to drinking and separately driving. But yeah, of course it's a right. But I still think the basic hold, thank you for calling me out on that, Luna. That's an important, certainly, distinction to make. We have the right to vote, in these times especially. Yes, good point, Luna. Thank you. But I do think it's also all the more important that we exercise it responsibly. No Middle Ground says, what is the reason questionable candidates are making it this far? Well, I think this country has a long, upstanding history of questionable candidates making it pretty far. So I don't know that there's a particularly unique answer for why that's the case now. Luna says, voting is also an exercise in harm reduction. So that I love. I have this argument all the time with friends of mine who talk about politicians not deserving their vote. And it's just a mindset that I can't wrap my head around whatsoever. When I go to check out at the supermarket, I don't think, which of these lines have deserved my cart? I think, how will my day proceed best because I can get out of here quicker? That's it. Which is the harm reduction? Which is the least harmful line for me to wait on here? And that's the one I choose. Why? Because I have to get out, so I have to choose one of them. I don't sit there and think, okay, cash register people and you self-checkout machines, let's see, let's impress me, deserve my cart. I just don't think that way, and I don't understand why anyone thinks that way about politicians either. They haven't deserved my vote, therefore they shall not have it. What is that? Someone's going to be president. Someone's going to be your senator. Someone's going to be your member of Congress. You have to choose. I don't mean you have to vote, but I mean the system has to choose. There's going to be a choice. You're going to end up on the long line to get out of the supermarket or the short line. Or you'll die in the supermarket if you don't choose. I sense a Clash song coming on here. But the point is, there's going to be a choice. So of course you choose the lesser of two evils. We do that all day, virtually every minute of the day. We don't go to restaurants and say, which of you deserves my order? Which dish deserves my order? We choose whichever one we want the most. Or if it's a restaurant we don't like and we went there because someone else likes it, we go with the one that has the least pesto or capers in it, you know? Harumph. Okay, Joshua J says there should be an IQ requirement to vote. That is incorrect. Kalita says, wow, almost glowing when wanting to talk about self. I hope that didn't mean that I was glowing when talking about myself. But yeah, the concept of self, that's a fascinating thing. Who's the political ramifications, I think, of which are not really examined, I think. Okay, so Kalita says, are you talking about the lesser of two evil vote? Because I'd rather vote for good. Sure. If my choice is vote for good or vote for the lesser of two evils, I'll choose vote for good. But if my choice is vote for the lesser of two evils or don't vote at all, then I'll take the lesser of two evils. If you have the choice to vote for someone who you think is just the best, and gosh, we found the great person, right? We found the great person of our times, and of course I'll vote for them. Great, that's fantastic. Also, this isn't a kiddie story. That's not what happens. People in politics have to make choices. They are compromised all the time. We want them to compromise all the time because they don't always agree with us. So yeah, of course we're choosing a lesser of two evils, or maybe three. But the idea that it has to be, my love for thee must be unalloyed. Where in life do we impose that standard? Leonardo da Vinci says, my British accent of privilege is amazing. That's hilarious. Apocalypse Devotee says, the self is the eternal, unchanging essence of all being and non-being. Right, like I said, does not exist. I'm sorry I was being flipped there. We can have a long philosophical debate about it later. Apocalypse Devotee. Darisabel P says, if you don't vote, you are only saying you are okay with other people choosing who represents you and your values. Fair enough. Okay, so Amanda K, let's end on someone agreeing with me. Yay. Amanda K says, I agree. We pick the less of two all the time, and it sucks, but it happens, and we must pick. That is correct. You must pick. So, although, again, if you're not good at picking and you haven't educated yourself and really done the work internally as well, I'm not going to cry if you don't vote. But if you don't vote because now I've lost my accent, damn you, sir. If you don't vote because you have not earned my vote, that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. All right. I'm going to say goodbye now. So thank you for being here today. Again, I'm going to South Bend next week. If you're in the area and you want to hit me up, hit me up. If you are at the South Bend Common Council meeting at the County City building on Monday, say hello. Either way, I'll have reporting from there, and I'll be doing TYTI Daily from there. So please subscribe to make sure you don't miss them. Again, it's TYT Investigates here on YouTube, and you can also go like and follow us on Facebook. And we've been kind of on fire lately in terms of our growth and viewership and all that. So if you've been sharing, talking about us, A, thank you, and B, let me know. Again, let me know on Twitter. We can amplify what you're doing, give you, say thank you where appropriate, even if you're disagreeing, which you can and should, right? This is supposed to be a conversation. So again, you can find me on Twitter at JT Larson. And I only have two things to say at this point. Please take care of each other. Take care of yourselves. And I'll see you tomorrow, which I guess is a third thing.